Sheri, it is a pleasure to actually meet you in person. I mean, we caught up the other day at the Macquarie event briefly, but actually didn't get sit down with you and actually speak. And so, thank you so much for your time. And I'd love to get to know you a little bit more, um, and to learn about your story. And specifically, I think you bring a really incredible outside perspective, right? We had a little bit of a chat off camera earlier around how carbon markets tend to be so esoteric. It's very inside baseball. We're all kind of talking at each other and not listening to one another. And it's really nice to have an adult come into the room and provide us that objective viewpoint. So thank you and welcome to the market. I would love to just hear a little bit more about it. I think the audience would love that.
Well, thank you so much, Renee. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure that I want to be the adult in the room, so let's keep this fun.
Okay, let's keep it fun.
No, but I think I do come with a really different background, and I think it's quite interesting. So, not to spend a ton of time on it, but I spent the first 22 years of my career in automotive. From the age of 17, I was at General Motors, a great company to grow up in. It's driving a ton of impact now in the energy transition space with EVs.
Yeah.
And then I moved from there over to General Electric to lead part of our onshore wind business in the developing countries and the countries outside North America. And
not part of. Let's just iterate. I want to focus on that a bit. Countries outside of North America. So you have a delineation. North America, the rest of the world. You led that rest of the world business.
I did. We called it international.
International.
But in that, you just have 30 years of great training through companies that just build operational excellence. They breed it, product development, program management, leadership strategy, financial tools, and
structure.
And I got a knock last summer to come join Climate Impact Partners. And the whole impetus behind it from our investors was come bring all that operational experience into Climate Impact Partners to help us grow and scale.
Right.
And maybe bring it into the market. And so I'm really excited because when I look around, I see there's a huge opportunity. We talk about scale all the time. We're not using the tools that have gone before us, that are already been proven out. And they're really boring tools, right? It's standard work, it's templates, it's, data analytics. I mean, that's coming in more and more, but there's just these really basic tools that I think can help us a lot.
I completely agree. Can you give me maybe an example of it? You mentioned standards and standardization. Automotive is renowned for these types of standards. You spent how many years at GE?
I was at GE.
GM?
22 years.
22 years. Okay, so you've seen your fair share of different standards.
Yeah.
But, they provide a foundational layer of standards, right? And I'm not talking here about the independent crediting standards that we talk about standards in the carbon markets. You're talking about robust standards that can then be auditable. So there's trust in the systems and in the companies that operate in that ecosystem. You want to give me just a little bit of a synopsis on that?
Yeah, that's a great comment. So an example of what I'm referencing here, Renee, is in automotive, there's national standards, whether it's NHTSA for the US, or there's European standards, there's crash regulations, et cetera. And they're set so every company has to meet them. But not only do they do that, there's also voluntary standards that the companies align to help simplify the supply base and how different suppliers can be working together. So, one airbag may go into multiple products, but that supplier can really optimize and focus on what matters, which is the safety and execution of that airbag. And instead of then submitting data on every test that's done, for example, in automotive, like on a crash test in NHTSA, they may just be audited because they've now shown enough data to build this rigor and trust in their performance levels. And that enables GM to focus on other things versus spending so much time on what I would call the base, very important and foundational work, but the base work that all vehicles must be.
And we need that in this market because a lot of the time it's reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. And it's kind of like exhausting, quite frankly, to see every single iteration kind of deconstruct and then reassemble every single time. From an engineering perspective, that's not scalable. It effectively clogs up the paint, then you have no output and you don't have any P&L, and that's a wrap. So we need that for this market.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do you see that we can implement some of those lessons to this, I call it an adolescent market. A lot of people say it's nascent. I've been around for a little bit of a while. The folks that founded your firm are essentially my heroes in this space. They've been around for 3 decades, effectively, in this space. So let's give them credit where credit is due. They're the forefathers of this market. And so there's quite a large history. But now we're building on that foundation. We're standing on that kind of precipice now to build up.
Yeah.
So now moving forward, how do we apply those lessons from the big end of town, let's say, to this kind of vibrant and adolescent market?
Yeah, I mean, it's boring, right? But it's
boring,
applying.
but it's essential.
It's
right?
essential.
It's like why we have rules of law.
Yes.
Right. It's boring.
Yeah.
Right. And I say that as a lawyer, but without it, you just have chaos. So.
But that's what this market feels like, everybody, right? A bit of chaos. And so I'll give you one small example, and this can be applied anywhere. But think about one project execution, and project developers are doing this. Not everybody, but some. It's like when you think about deploying a reforestation project. How do you think about standardizing the nurseries so everybody's doing it the same way? How do you think about the flow of how those trees are delivered so you improve the mortality rate? You make sure they're getting water, they're not sitting on the side of the road. And how are you communicating out into the field, into the communities you're working with? You have standard contracts, you have standard methods of doing this, standard ways to train. You can find this anywhere in your life where think about, like, if you can't find your car keys, what's the thing you do? You find one place to hang your car keys so you always know your car keys are there. I mean, that's the concept.
That is literally my problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you need a spot. You need a spot. But there's waste, in automotive or lean terms, there's waste across the whole system that we can clean up that will not only make it easier to do our work, it'll actually make our execution, our outcomes better. Yeah, and more trustworthy. And I think trustworthy isn't because people don't trust us, but we aren't meeting the commitments that we make on the front end because of this chaos. So,
and it's auditable and verifiable.
That's right.
And that auditability is so important.
It is important.
Right? And then it becomes foundational and boring, like you said, and then just auditors come through on a manualized basis. You met and exceeded the baseline. Great.
Yeah.
Moving on.
What's
right. Next?
That's right. What's
right?
next?
What's next? Right? And conversely, if you don't, now there's a penalty for it, right?
That's
and we need that at the actor level. So to participate in this market as a provider, as a supplier, essentially in the supply chain, I mean, there's that grading all the time in enterprise. And so why should carbon be different? We should have this.
You're spot on. And I think if we want to be taken seriously, we need to have execution and outcomes that can be taken seriously. And it's not because we say it, but because we do it with our proof points, right? There's a conversation we have internally at Prime Impact Marketers. We say activity or outcomes, what really matters in the end, and it's outcomes. And that's what we need to continuously improve our processes to enable those better outcomes.
Oh, I like that a lot. Is that your catchphrase now? You should have that.
Maybe.
Yeah, put it in the back of the business
I'll
card.
talk to Rebecca how to market.
To your comms team.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. And if you don't, can I steal
you
it?
take it.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. I love the fact that you're bringing that rigor to our market, right? And that objectivity. So that's great. And I think amazing things are ahead if you can help not only unlock that with your organization, but also create this kind of catalyst event to unlock and others to follow. So that's great. And not to say that other shops aren't doing this as well and other institutions, but we certainly see that in financial intermediaries, that rigor. Many of them are regulated, they have this kind of thing. But on the traditional carbon intermediary side, I think that's been lacking quite fairly, and so I think it's great. But I want to talk about another kind of really important, and I think it's the elephant in the room, right? This year is essentially, there's been a lot of headwinds in the market that are, as a result of this lack of trust and lack of confidence of the market. And then the conversation I hear all the time from the sell side, so project developers and folks on the sell side, is when is the demand coming back? How do we unlock the demand? And people talk about it as if it's this kind of promised land of what the demand is, and it's this kind of nebulous concept, but it's really simple, right? It's about understanding what are the key drivers to unlock that demand, to enable the decision making at the organizations that are actually on the buy side. You've come from many of those large organizations. You've seen the operations, that excellence and that rigor that exists within those organizations, and you see the roadblocks if things don't actually meet the quality criteria for the standard. So how do we as an industry engage with the buy-side clients and help to empower them to make those better decisions and to then ultimately unlock the demand? I think it's in that sequence.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's really interesting because being relatively new to the carbon markets, as we just talked about, I still have a bit of an outside observer take, and I think everybody in the carbon markets knows that this market is needed. We have real tools to drive real action today.
Agreed.
Yeah, totally. Everybody's there, and so the mantra is act now, act now. But I step back and I think, like, why aren't we using our traditional tools? We need to be putting the customer in the center. I think us putting our corporates and our governments at the center to say, what problems are you trying to solve, and how can these tools work, or how do you need them to shift, turn, and twist to enable that demand flow to happen? I think is still a missing element. We do a lot of talking to ourselves.
We do a lot of talking to ourselves and at ourselves, and we have this circular firing squad mentality of like, no, that's not perfect. No, my thing's perfect. And then we just kind of denigrate one another as a way to kind of get a leg up.
Yeah.
That's silly. It's not constructive. It's destructive by design, and it needs to stop. We can't have that anymore. And like you said, if you put the client first, and we're in the service of that customer, and instead of saying, here's a solution, just try it, like being, it's the old adage of like the hammer,
right.
All they see is a nail.
Right.
No, we need to ask, what tool do you need? Oh, this is the tool that we think works. Here's how.
Yeah.
And actually listen to them first and ask those questions. That's how we then get there.
That's right.
And move forward.
That's right. And I think, what happens in contracting markets like we're in right now is you get a scarcity mentality.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think that's what's resulting in this.
And there's some PTSD that happens from the old heads.
That's why I don't have this.
No, you don't. And that's why
I think I will in about another month or so.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because I think from here, there's a lot of sense of optimism in this COP. I mean, there's been announcement after announcement after announcement that I've been incredibly buoyed by. So I think that the momentum is back. We need to carry that forward so we get further inertia on that flywheel, right? But it's by maintaining the integrity. That's
right.
It's non-negotiable, and continually striving forward. I think that's agreed. I think all the industry bodies have demonstrated that. The standards just came together as a coalition of the willing, effectively, to re-endorse that. There's so many good announcements, but there's this realization that these commitments that are being made to 2030 and to 2050, they're not being achieved. And without this solution that is carbon markets to provide a price signal, it doesn't move forward.
That's right.
But we now have to reflect as an industry on integrity and further other things, as you mentioned, around that, having that rigor, and then deliver the solution to our clients, but make sure it's the right fit.
That's right.
Right? Because they're all different flavors, so they might have a different fit.
That's right. And they're all solving, they're at different points in their journey, they're solving for different challenges. And it isn't all, like you said, well, here's what I have in my toolbox. Like, let me find the nail for this hammer.
Yeah. Completely. I just chatted with Benedict von Butler, so he brought the asset manager perspective. So he looks at it from a risk-adjusted basis and portfolio management perspective, which is fantastic. This is what's necessary, right? So corporates build out a portfolio, diversify your risk. Your team brought that in, like over decades ago, right? Around not having that bias necessarily around, here is our book and only buy what we're selling. It's like, no, let's tailor make something for you that suits your needs. Now, I've seen that certainly to be the case. A lot of corporates, especially in multinationals, they have operations in so many different jurisdictions. They want to match as close as possible the carbon emissions to the geography of the abatement that occurs, right? And so it's providing that solution, that suite of offering. It may be that it sits on your books, it may be that it sits on somebody else's, but you're effectively providing that structural design. Those kind of things that go above and beyond, that's what clients need. And if you listen to them, if you take the time to listen, then you can provide a solution.
And what I would encourage on the client side is, if you need help, ask, because it's complex. I mean, this is a complex area, and there are many really smart, knowledgeable people that want to drive impact here that will help you.
And they're willing to help. Not only are they experts, they've been through the trenches, but actually we are willing to help.
That's right. Because we are here to drive impact.
I said to you kind of jokingly earlier before off camera that I think every person in the carbon market is a frustrated environmentalist, masquerading as a financial markets kind of expert. But it's true. Like, the passion is the key driver here. And I think that's what the well that we draw upon, just to continue to come back during the bad times and just persevere. And it's just like continuous. And I think right now, sure, this year, 2023, let's say it's been the winter in terms of the demand compared to the summer of 21, where everything was just going. But it's just cycles. Yeah. And I think that now we're entering the spring, 24. Things are starting to shoot up. And I think as we start to see better action, better mandates from a policy perspective, and we provide better rigor, as you mentioned, and better solutions, these things can now start to unlock. We've got to work hand in hand with our clients, the enterprise clients, to help them to achieve their decarbonization ambitions. It's incredibly difficult on the scope 3 side in particular. Scope 1 and 2, you have kind of control of, but it's still very difficult.
Yeah, right.
Oftentimes, they have to invest so much money on the CapEx side of things to achieve these decarbonization kind of pathways. But in the absence of a price signal, the rational actor in that organization says, well, why would I pay $100 internally to reduce this when the external price is $4?
Right.
And so you need a higher price externally to drive that internal price, and we know that. But the scope 3 is infinitely more difficult. Because, I mean, you and I'd love to get your take on this, but supply chain.
Yeah.
People talk about supply chain as this kind of like buzzword. You've lived supply chains, right? Across renewables and automotive.
Right.
Can you tell me, give me the
we
insight
didn't
of the
talk
complexity,
about this,
but let's go.
So I actually ran global supplier quality for General Motors.
Yeah.
So that's all the suppliers globally. There's at that time, so this was years ago, but
How many thousands?
10,000 tier 1. Tier 1. So you never had a good day, especially on a Friday. But this gets back to like, this is super hard. So when people are saying, oh, you just measure scope 3, it's like, oh my gosh, we have to think about how we drive that decarbonization.
Those tier 1 suppliers, they have suppliers, and then they have suppliers. So it's a web, it's a network.
Yeah, and that's just the supply. It's not the rest. That's not the end.
And then you got the inputs.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult.
It's really, really complicated.
Yeah.
But we're talking to a lot of corporates that want to have impact, and they want to be thinking about that supply chain and not just like, oh, how we just offset it or force our suppliers to do something, but how do we really work together to actually drive value back into the process?
Yes.
With a better sustainability outcome. And I think that's where
win-win.
It's a win-win. And this is where we all need to take a deep breath and pause and say, there's value to be created here through this if we stop and think about what are we solving for and how do we do that in a sustainable way.
Well, great. Can I get your parting thoughts? I was checking the watch because I know you're a busy lady and you got to run. But you again, bring objectivity, you're coming from this external kind of viewpoint. What have you taken as a kind of a lesson over the last year or so that you've been in this space? Open question to you. And then where do you see it kind of going forward as an industry?
That's good. Well, what I have taken as a lesson is what we're acting on at Climate Impact Partners, which is how do we do exactly what we've talked about for the last several minutes around bringing this rigor? Because I, from my background, see there's this huge opportunity to learn from the industries that have gone before us that actually we're not capitalizing on today.
No.
My lesson is how do I do that faster and how do I get more partners on board to do that with?
Okay.
Because I think there's real opportunity there. And, and I just encourage everybody in the markets to lean into that. So what does that look like for them? Because we have to create that foundational strength really to launch off of. It doesn't matter how much demand you have. So that's one lesson. And what encourages me is I go to projects and I visit them.
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah, it's hard. I will cry.
No, I literally cried.
I
literally cried. Yeah. No, so I'm not gonna ask you to rehash that. But the impact is so visible, and we can take videos and we can take photos and we can try to communicate that passion to clients. But when you take a client to a project site visit, I took a very large airline client to Guatemala, and we went with the Reuters film crew. And now I'm gonna cry. But effectively, we went and we saw the impact that these projects had on the ground. We talked to the indigenous communities. We talked to women in particular that are disenfranchised in these very remote communities in the jungle. But essentially, the projects just not only protect the biome and the ecosystem, but they provide mobile clinics for healthcare, right? And so now you have midwives, you have access to just a whole bunch of different medical treatments,
right?
And they said this is transformational,
right? To their lives.
To their lives, I have had children as a result of this that have survived.
Yeah.
So the team that I went with, the sustainability manager was a lady, and she cried on camera. We had to shoot for ages, and it was just so impactful. So I completely love the fact that you're visiting projects and seeing that impact on the ground. I just wish more people could. And I wish that media would also stop denigrating this wonderful solution that has so much impact. It's not just like vanilla where it's just carbon for carbon. It's a ton. No, it goes way above and beyond. And we can talk about baselines and over-crediting and under-crediting and all the stuff that's inside baseball. But we lose the forest, we'll miss the forest from the trees because we're not actually talking about the impact.
Absolutely.
So, I love that.
So that's what gives me hope that countries are leaning in. What happened at the African Climate Summit this summer/fall, Africa is holding their position. What do they need? What are they looking for? And they're not doing it in a way to say, just come give us money as a donation. They're saying we want to grow economies built around carbon. And
they're educated and they're knowledgeable.
Yeah.
So there's no some people actually said to me, this is a misnomer. Oh, we have to do a whole bunch of capacity building. I'm like, No, these folks actually have done the homework.
Yeah.
They're very clued in. And now they're looking to structure deals. Yes. They're willing to transact here and make corresponding adjustments and all this other stuff. But they're experts at this already.
We have a
and
project.
They're ready to go. This is a sleeping giant.
Exactly.
Right now.
We have a project in Kenya at Circle Gas. It's a meter cook stove. 2,000 jobs were created in 2 years. It's just that has nothing to do with carbon. Carbon is obviously carbon finance
it's
is
a commodity
the
on the back end, right?
But these lives are really changing. And so what I would say to everybody is figure out how you play. Stand up to say what you need to do it, but then get on and do it. Because the climate needs us, but really there's lots of people we could be helping at the same time.
All right, cool. I need you to do one thing for me.
Okay.
Just do a mic drop.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.